Welcome to Career Landscapes, a peek into professional lives brought to you by One Voice for Change. I'm your host, Felicity Minch, and today we are speaking with renowned cancer epidemiologist Anna Giuliano. I would like to take a moment and read a bit about her. Dr. Anna Giuliano is the founding director of the Center for Immunization and Infection Research in Cancer at the Moffitt Cancer Center in Florida. Currently, she works in Puerto Rico, Mexico, Brazil, Ghana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Kenya. All of their research is focused on preventing cancers caused by human papillomavirus, HPV, in men and women. Some of this research includes studying people living with HIV, as they are at the highest risk for these cancers. The research includes testing vaccines, methods for cancer screening, and new vaccine approaches to treat precancers and cancer. Welcome, Anna. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation to speak with you.
Oh, I got to tell you, I was looking over your research and I just got to the tip of the iceberg. You have well over 400 publications. You're world renowned. I'm a little bit intimidated by this interview, but your work is so inspirational and so needed. What led you to pursue this career? What was your inspiration to go into this field?
That is such a great question. And I get a lot of new researchers asking that as well. Like, how did you get to where you're at? What I say is it's about being in the right place at the right time and being inspired at the right time in your life. When I was doing my PhD in Boston, I was on a very different path. And I decided to take a course in pathology at the medical school. We were allowed to do that as graduate biomedical students. And I fell in love with pathology, and it turned out that the head of pathology was a woman who was developing new methods, mechanical methods for looking at cervical cancer screening in a more precise way. And she sort of took me under her wing and she said, listen, Anna, cervical cancer is what I focus on. You need to know that there's this new virus that's just been identified and it looks really interesting. So now I'm going to tell you, you'll get a hint at how old I am. This is in the mid-1980s. And she said, this work is coming out of Germany. It looks fascinating. There's something about a virus. And I think what I'd like you to do is learn everything you can about it, and let's try to understand it relative to cervical cancer. And I said, okay. And I started to do a deep dive, and I realized that the study of cervical cancer combined everything that I was interested in. It was a cancer that affects women. It's a cancer that mainly affects women living in the poorest countries of the world, as well as the poorest communities in the United States. And for me, that is where I wanted to work. I wanted to work where the need was greatest. And we had this virus that had just been identified that people knew almost nothing about. So it was like this amazing opportunity to learn and to contribute at a time when that work was most needed. And also at the same time help to promote what we knew we could do to prevent cervical cancer, which at the time was just cervical cancer screening. So it started everything, and that was mid-80s, and then started actually doing the research in 1990.
That's fascinating, because I saw that you had your PhD in nutritional biochemistry.
Yeah.
And
I was on a completely different path. I was working as a bench scientist, very successful. And actually, my PhD mentor wanted me to go on. At the time, molecular biology was, the new area. And I had been offered postdoc fellowships at UCLA, actually. Also working at the USDA in Maryland, as well as in Chicago. and in Wisconsin. And I said, no, you know what? I'm going to pursue the cervical cancer story. I'm going to get cross-trained as an epidemiologist, and I'm going to go where cervical cancer has its highest incidence. And in 1990, that was the US-Mexico border, as well as among women living on reservation, American Indian women. And a fellowship opened up at the University of Arizona. I said, oh, that's perfect. I'll be right at the epicenter of everything. Completely naive. I'm just going to go to Arizona and I'm going to prevent cervical cancer. It was foolhardy in hindsight, but it worked out, thankfully.
No, a lot of times when we're completely naive, we're more curious. And I tell students to always be curious. Just curiosity leads you to places you would never know where you could never plan. Curiosity is the heart of life, I believe.
Curiosity and naivete also makes you fearless because you don't know what you should be afraid of. So you're like, oh, I can do that. And then you just kind of head first go in and you figure it out.
Yes.
And what I'd like to say is if you knew all of the things that you'd have to deal with, you probably wouldn't do it. But sometimes you just need to go in and not know and just dive and make it work. And that's what I did.
I agree. I agree. Well, what is a typical day or week like for you? Or is there even a typical day or week?
So because of all the countries that I work with, there's a lot of travel also. So we're able to communicate as research teams via Zoom. I mean, thanks for COVID-19 that Zoom became a really good tool. I mean, we used to have to do, what was the other one that we always used that never worked as well? But anyway, I'm on a lot of Zoom meetings with a lot of, so if you look at my computer screen, you'll see it could be 30 different pictures at a time, or it could just be two, the way we're talking to each other now. So I do a lot of Zoom meetings with people from around the world. And a lot of it is about, so depending on the phase of research, setting things up still in the planning stages, deciding on what we're going to have in the research or not, and how we're going to make that happen. To everything from what I did on Friday, which is I zoomed into South Africa and Zimbabwe, and I was able to participate in the study launch where they were actually training the staff to begin that project. So it kind of depends. I don't go to in-person meetings that much anymore because people are so at a distance with each other. And I have to say, I miss that.
Yeah.
So that's when I'm in town. When I'm at the research sites, it's so much more fun. I'm with everybody in person. We're talking over breakfast and talking over lunch, taking walks and discussing. And having dinners together. It's very engaging and just wonderful to be with people from all over the world.
Mhm. Yeah. And how is the research developing in other countries? Is it as prevalent as the United States, or are we leading in the research, or are all countries on board on this research now?
We're very privileged in the United States. I still believe that we are in the lead, and it's in large part by our governmental funding through the National Institutes of Health. Very few countries have the opportunities to apply for grant funding as much as we do. So I think we still are in the lead. Canada, for its population, is probably a second. Canada and UK have really good governmental funding. Right. But we also have, it's not just having access to the research money, it's also our infrastructure is really outstanding. And our permissions to allow us to do the kind of research that's needed are much more flexible than what you have, for instance, in Europe. It's very hard to implement population studies with humans in Europe. They're very strict about regulations. And it really constrains and limits the research. So I'd say we're still very much so in the lead. Now, the countries that I'm working with, South Africa and Zimbabwe, Botswana, Kenya, have outstanding research infrastructure, albeit with less funding. And they have made, and the same with our partners in Mexico and Brazil. They are phenomenal partners because they have the training and they have the infrastructure, at least in the major cities. So it's been really delightful to work with all of those. But they are dependent on the US colleagues bringing the funding to those clinical sites. They don't have access to the funding that we do. And so this is where the partnership comes in an important way.
Mm-hmm. So funding goes to you and then you spread it throughout the others. And
yeah, so technically, when we write a grant proposal to the National Institutes of Health, the funding comes to the institution, not to me personally, which is actually good. So it's a safeguard so that individual investigators can't just go to the Caribbean on a vacation.
So it goes to Moffitt Cancer Center? It goes to Moffitt. Oh, great.
Yeah, and then it's administered through Moffitt. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And then we have subcontracts to each of the different clinical organizations that we work with, and they have their own safeguards as well. So it ensures there's safeguards with the data as well. I'm not allowed to touch the data as a principal investigator. So, which means there's no way I can influence the results of the study.
Oh,
so
yeah, one of the kids wanted to know about that. So thank you for covering this.
This is data integrity. Yeah. So I can't change results and bias. So let's say, okay, for instance, I really believe everyone should be vaccinated for a number of things, including against human papillomavirus. So let's say I was doing a clinical trial and I wanted to see how well the vaccine worked. I can't touch the data to influence it to make it look like it works better than it actually does. Right. I'm steps removed from manipulating the data.
Good. And then the other researchers in the other countries, are they a step away too? And who looks at the data then? Who is in charge of the data?
So this is where you have, in epidemiology, we say we do team science. It's impossible for one person to do everything. So in the case of the work we're doing globally, we have different what are called research cores. So one of our research cores is the data management and statistics and bioinformatics. So the data are entered into databases that are actually available in the cloud. So you're in Kenya and you're entering in remotely, it's in the cloud that's then accessed at the Moffitt Cancer Center by our biostatistical team. And they are the ones that manage all the data and then under our direction, analyze the data. So we'll say we want, we need to summarize X, Y, and Z variables. Please put that in a table for us. And they do all the analyses.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you get the final results, do you get the final results?
Yeah. So then I set up table shells. The biostatisticians fill in the data after they've done the analyses. And then it's our responsibility to take those data and report them. And it's actually a very important responsibility because to receive money to do research and not share the results is really against the ethos of what we do. So in the public domain, when you're funded by the government, you have a responsibility to educate and disseminate and share everything that you've learned from your research. And so we're obligated to make sure that we're publishing our results in a timely fashion. So people don't have to repeat something that doesn't work, or they can take what you've reported and then take the research to the next step and continue to advance the science.
Mhm. That makes total sense. That certainly makes sense. And what one of the kids wanted to know, what keeps you motivated? What do you ever burn out? Um, or is your passion so strong? People ask me this all the time, and my passion is so strong that I don't burn out. In fact, my friends have to literally stop me and invite me out to dinner or something so that I take time off. But what keeps you motivated?
Well, there's still so much we need to do. I mean, if we take, it isn't just cervical cancer that human papillomavirus causes. There's 6 cancers that HPV causes in both men and women. And so on the male side, there's just so much education that I need to do to make people understand the importance of our vaccine for everybody, and what we can do to prevent those cancers. And on the cervical cancer side, I saw this in 1990. It hasn't changed much. Over almost 600,000 women every year are diagnosed with cervical cancer unnecessarily. This is a completely preventable cancer.
Hmm.
And all of those cancers, the majority are occurring still in the poorest women of the world, those that are living in sub-Saharan Africa, India, and parts of Latin America. And it's just, we have a worldwide goal to eliminate this cancer. So it's like you can't stop until you really make more progress. And I'm hoping by the time I have to stop working, I don't know, when I'm 80 or 90, we will have made more progress.
Yeah, but I'm sure you've made a lot of progress. Is
We,
it
yeah.
one step forward and one step back and 2 steps forward and 1 step back and 2 steps forward? Or how is it because of our population explosion and um,
It's really it's a health disparity issue. So we've made amazing progress in higher middle income countries and high income countries. We're very close to eliminating cervical cancer in Sweden. That's great. It's a tiny country that has less people than the state of Florida, and it's a very homogeneous population. And then you have countries like South Africa, which not only have internal issues and financial issues, but have, people migrating into South Africa from war-torn countries in other parts of Africa. And so it's a huge poor immigrant population that they have to take care of as well, with scarce resources. And then you have, I've been out in villages in Botswana where, there's barely a clinic, and few nurses that are trained to be able to provide the services that are needed. So it's just the disparities are huge still. But we're developing new technologies, and forcing manufacturers to price things so that they're more affordable. And we're deploying them now in ways that are very, very exciting that I think are going to really change that picture, especially in sub-Saharan Africa.
what technologies are being used now?
So instead of needing a nurse to do a pap smear and then having to have pathologists and all of the infrastructure needed to read that pap smear and return the results, women can self-sample on their own. They don't even need a nurse to sample. We can test with molecular tests that are $5 a pop compared to $45 for doing a pap cytology. And the HPV testing is much more precise, and reliable. So we can identify those women who really need treatment, and it's a small fraction compared to all the women that you're screening. So it saves on healthcare dollars and in the need for trained healthcare personnel and so on. And the prices they're going to come down. Yeah.
So it's almost like COVID-19, we have the
Yeah,
tests. Is it similar to
that's
where
exactly it.
test
Yeah.
yourself to see if you have
Yeah.
the virus?
Yeah.
Wow,
Exactly.
I had not
Yeah.
heard about that.
Yeah.
That's
And
exciting.
actually, it's been deployed in parts of Europe, as well as in Africa. the US Food and Drug Administration has finally, it took them forever, has approved self-sampling so we can use it in the United States now.
Oh, interesting.
Just in the past month.
And would that be something just over the counter for people, or?
It would still be done in the clinic setting.
Okay,
It's not quite ready for COVID-19 style testing.
right.
But it really improves, women, it's going to make women more comfortable, more readily likely to go for screening. There's always a reason to go to a clinic. So while you're there, you could have a self-sample.
Mhm. Were you one person that was behind this idea?
I was not part of the self-sampling and the testing. I am part of that kind of work to deploy it at a health system level in Africa, but I was not part of getting the FDA approval here in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've been mainly, up until a few years ago, most of my work has been around the vaccine.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. How do you see this evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, this is huge to have the self-tests. What else do you see in the future, in 5 or 10 years?
So everybody's familiar with getting vaccinated against COVID-19 or tetanus every 10 years. And the high school students probably don't remember being in middle school and having to get the meningococcal vaccine and Tdap and so on. I mean, this is part of our, everyday language. Well, imagine if you could be treated for cancer or pre-cancer with a treatment vaccine. So, yeah, so as simple as injecting into the arm, under the skin, or into the muscle, just like you do with prevention. We're working on a series of different types of therapeutic vaccines that we think will either be able to be used alone or in combination with much simpler methods of treatment, so that we can then do what's called primary prevention. I'm going to prevent you getting the virus that causes these lesions. But if for some reason you didn't have a chance to get that prevention vaccine and you did develop the pre-cancer or cancer, then I'm also going to deploy a vaccine approach to treat that cancer. Very simple. You don't need surgeons to do that. A nurse can administer it. So in parts of the world where physicians and highly trained nurses are not available, this could work very nicely.
That is amazing.
That's the future. We're not there yet, but that is the future. Yeah.
Yeah. And to think of artificial intelligence, all the things that AI is going to be able to provide, who knows what the future holds. What's the most challenging aspects of your job? Is it getting funding? Is it getting the education out? Is it, what's the challenge?
Funding has become more and more difficult. We have, the national budget isn't so good, and the National Institutes of Health have what we say are what's called flatline. So the NIH has not received, if you look at the cost of living increases that occur every year, which is around 3% per year, the budget has not increased at the same rate that inflation has increased. And there are that many more scientists that are applying for grants. So they're vying for the same small pool of money. So it's becoming increasingly more difficult to get the funding. And it often takes up to 2 years of writing the grant over and over again before you are actually awarded. So it slows the science down by a lot, and that's a serious problem.
And it has to be a grant through the government. You couldn't partner with some billionaire that would want to help fund healthcare.
That would be great. So the Gates Foundation does do some funding, but they only fund what they're interested in, and they're very specific about what they fund. So it's limited. And no, it would be great to have billionaire friends. I mean, especially in the setting of a worldwide goal of eliminating cervical cancer. That's what we need, is a billionaire.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Well, maybe a billionaire will listen to this video and
That'd be great.
help you out. Let me see what other questions I have. I know the students had some questions. And let me see. One interesting one, she asked, she's 16, how many types of cancers are there? And have any cancers been completely eliminated or eradicated? And does anyone know when cancer was first discovered?
Yeah. So let's start with the last question. In the most ancient medical text, cancer was described.
Really?
Yes, so cancer has been with us a very, very long time. There are
Hmm.
actually hundreds of different types of cancers. It's not just one. And
Mhm.
each cancer has a different, is caused by different things. Some cancers, we just don't even know what the cause is, which of course makes it really hard to prevent because you don't know what to do. There, one of our most famous cancer biologists said it's really chance, it's random. Even when we know the cause, it can be random. So, for instance, we know that human papillomavirus causes cervical cancer. Yet, so many women have been exposed and infected with HPV, but very few actually develop cervical precancer or cancer. And so that's the chance and the randomness factor that plays into it.
Do you think,
So
do you think it has to do with our immune system, an individual's immune system, or
when it comes to
genetic?
viruses that cause cancer, the immune system plays a major role.
Okay.
So, for instance, people living with HIV have suppressed immunity, even when they're on really good therapy and have almost no HIV viral load. They still have a significantly higher risk of developing cancers caused by viruses. So yes, the immune system plays a major role. But
Hmm.
what part of it and how does it work and how does it interrelate with itself is a very complex system.
Hmm.
So around 300 different types of cancers that's been with us a very, very long time. The good news is that since Americans stopped smoking, we've gotten to the point now where very few people smoke, which is a good thing.
Mhm.
The incidence of cancers overall have declined dramatically. So that's the good news. And our treatments have improved so that people are actually living with cancer as a chronic disease and not dying from cancer.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of good news out there.
Right.
We have not eliminated a cancer, but we can eliminate cervical cancer if we can get everyone vaccinated and women screened and treated appropriately. And I think the United States is on a good path to accomplishing that.
That's exciting. That definitely is motivating and exciting. Another, we talked about funding. Another kid asks, I'm thinking about going into medicine because 3 of my family have died of cancer. What should I study if I want to help people with cancer? Will there be many opportunities for cancer doctors and researchers in the future? And this boy is 14.
We need more cancer researchers, and we definitely need more cancer doctors or oncologists. So it's a commitment, and it's going to require commitment and persistence. So the first thing is get as many hard science and math courses under your belt while you're in high school, so that you're really well prepared when you get to college to get the highest grades in every math and science course that you take at university. Most people will take what's called a pre-medical curriculum because there's certain courses that are required for entry into medical school. you can fill that requirement, whether you're a biology major, biochemistry major, or an English major, or a history major. You can major in anything you want, so long as you complete those pre-medical courses. And actually, medical schools like to see people who have diversity in their educational background, because most people just think they need to major in biochemistry, which is fine. But bringing a broader approach and a way of thinking to medicine is highly valued as you start applying for medical school. So the options are infinite in terms of what you can do when you're in college. It's 4 years of medical school. Typically, it's a 3-year residency, unless you want to become a surgeon, and then it's a 7-year residency and a 2-year fellowship in oncology.
Good advice. Yeah, it would be interesting to have kids in the liberal arts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I understand that broad perspective. Kids are going to need a lot of skills, not just medical skills, but a lot of other skill sets to do this.
It's the humanity part of medicine that I think medical schools are trying to re-emphasize.
Mm-hmm. And even all my studies in philosophy, when I was in school, my second level was philosophy. It was music and philosophy. And that philosophy has helped me so much in my teaching and has led me into areas of psychology and working with people and students. Everything fits together. Like you said at the very beginning, you're naive and you just go in and you do things. That's the beautiful part of life. It's so joyful and wonderful to bring all these pieces together. And I tell kids there's only one of you. There's no one like you. And you will bring to the world what you have that's just unique to you. So I try to encourage students as much as I can. Let me see, what other question? Oh, do you ever face discrimination because you are a woman and because you work with vaccines?
So the female part, so I'm like a train going through, the path. I don't really care if, I guess I've been discriminated against. I don't know. I ignore it and it doesn't stop me. So if it has happened, I haven't paid attention to it. But, my friends will say, didn't you notice? Aren't you, and I'm so focused and directed that, what I say is just get out of my way. I'm moving through. So if there has been, and there should be, because I'm short and dark and female, right? So not only am I female, but I'm short and dark, which means I can't look down at people. I'm always looking up. But it has not been a problem for me in my career at all.
That's great.
In terms of vaccine, so yes, you'll notice that I never post on Facebook or Instagram or social media like that, because there are people who troll social media as they're anti-vaxxers. And we have been the target of very aggressive anti-vax individuals. So I stay away from some things that are very public facing, because I just want to avoid and sidestep being attacked in that way.
Right.
And things got crazy when the HPV vaccine was first licensed in 2006, and then things got crazy again, obviously during COVID.
Yes.
So I do have to be careful in terms of the anti-vaxxers.
Interesting. I think those are mainly the questions from the kids. We talked about getting funded. And there was one, is there any difference between working with young people in other countries and working with young people in the US? And I don't know how many young people you're actually working with. You might be doing more conferences and things that.
So I don't work with teenagers, but I do work with people in their early 20s.
Okay.
And No, there's people around the world are the same. I think the difference may be that people outside the US are hungrier to get involved and do things and are more willing to do things and work around the clock. I don't, and so the expression we use in research is, are you hungry for it? So Felicity, you describe it as the word passion. So that it's passion, but it's this hunger that you want to do more and more and more. And I sense that more from people outside the US, especially people who are coming from low and middle income countries. And I would like to see more of that drive and that passion and that hunger from young Americans.
Yes. It's interesting, even our work with other kids in Peru and Belize, the kids have a different drive and absolute focus and attention, and they're eager to work. And they often wind up working and doing class projects and meeting with teachers on the weekends. And there's no problem. They're so hungry. As you said, I love that word, but they are so passionate to make a difference, to know that they can contribute to whatever they're doing. It's slightly different attitude that
we talk a lot in my work setting about work-life balance. And I just kind of chuckle because if you look at the greats, there is no work-life balance. You're either all in or you're going to be mediocre. It's just the way it is. You'll have a nice life, you'll have a nice house, but you will never be great. That it's impossible. It takes that full commitment and drive and excitement about what you're doing, that you want to do the work at night and on the weekends. You don't shut that part of yourself off. So that's, I don't know.
Yeah, I have the exact same attitude. I don't mind working 7 days a week. Like I said, I'm always finding something new and exciting to do. My brain is always exploding with ideas. So yeah, it's very wonderful.
I mean, it's the same. Do you think Yo-Yo Ma says, oh, it's Saturday and Sunday, so I'm not going to practice because it's the weekend?
No. Yeah,
of
you're
course
right.
not.
You're right. Oh, the greatest musicians. I remember I studied with Pepe Romero, one of the world's greatest classical guitarists. And he said he has never had one day off from practicing the guitar, and he never wanted a day off.
Yeah.
And I said, even if you're sick, and he said, even if I'm sick, I played the guitar in bed for 5 or 10 minutes. I've always touched my guitar. He said, if I couldn't play my guitar, I would be in the worst mood ever. He said, so yeah, that passion. And I think people who don't have that passion, or people who like to jump from thing to thing, they try something for a while and that didn't work, and try something else, try something else. They're just constantly switching around and never really mastering anything.
But see, and this is what I say to the faculty I mentor and to my students. The hardest thing in a person's life is to find that passion for themselves. And that takes time. It takes thought. It has to be deliberate. And once you find that passion, that thing that drives you, the rest is easy. You just work at it. Working at it is easy. It's true. Finding what your calling is, what your true passion is, that is the hardest part.
And I've always told my friends, I said, now we're in the encore of our lives. So you and I are in the encore of our lives, so we can contribute so much now because we're in the encore, and we have more to do and more wisdom and more to share. So it's very exciting. So on that note, I'd love to close with 3 questions that I ask all my guests. The first question is, what is one piece of advice you would give young people today?
Oh boy. Be true to yourselves.
Yeah. And if you're true to yourself, you'll find your passion.
Exactly.
Great. Second question is, what gives you hope?
Oh, all the people I work with who, even when I do get tired, continue the mission and keep it going, then I have to catch up with them. So it's a community that is as driven and committed to this ideal of eliminating cancer.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And the last question is, who inspires you?
Oof. Well, we've lost a lot of people. I just lost a dear colleague to breast cancer who, up
Oh,
until the last day before she died, was working in the clinic in South Africa in a former township in clinics that she had built to do what she could to prevent women from dying of cervical cancer in these settings. So it's people like that it's like, I'm sorry, you can't say you're tired. It's just, when you have examples like Lynette Denny, there's no excuse for you not to do something.
and there are so many inspirational people out there. And I'm trying to get even my students to really find those people that are inspirational, because they need, we all need someone to look up to and someone to see what they're doing, to help light the way. And certainly you are the inspiration in your field. You have impacted thousands and thousands and inspired thousands of people. So you are an inspiration. You are truly an
Well,
inspiration.
thank you.
Yeah.
I hope that's true, but thank you.
Yeah, you definitely are. Well, thank you for this interview. Is there anything else you'd like to add or anything in closing?
No, I
Yeah.
just would like to hear about all the great things that this young student body of high schoolers are going to go off and do. So you can tell me all the great colleges and majors that they're going to start pursuing in the near future.
It is fun. This year I had 19 students graduate. So
That's great.
yeah, I had to go to several stores to buy enough graduation cards for all of them.
It's great.
Oh, well, Anna, thank you so much. Thank you for the
Sure.
work. Thank you for changing the world. And for everyone out there, you can find more information on Anna below and information about One Voice for Change below. And thank you for listening to this video. Thank you for supporting One Voice for Change. And there will be many more career landscapes coming up. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Anna. And until next time, bye.
Bye.